Hello everyone and welcome to Gerrard, Evolution of a Revolution Part 8, a Q&A special. My name's David and I'm joined by Stevie Clifford again as we talk through the journey of Steven Gerrard from novice manager to manager of the Invincible 55 champion. Steven, delighted to have you here and a fun show for us this week because we've had a great audience reaction to the show and this is really their show. This is their questions. This is what they want to know about.
Yeah, first of all, great to be back. And David, whoever thought when we started this we'd be on episode 8?
No,
and still have so much content. It's been great fun.
Double what I thought we would do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great fun. And as you said, the reaction we've had and the reaction to even these shows, this show is superb. So thank you, everybody. And I'm looking forward to getting into it because, there will be bits that we've missed and things that we would have thought, we should have mentioned that. So I'm sure we'll get through it all here.
Right, well, might as well just get stuck in. The first question comes from Derek Stewart on Patreon. He says, if Stevie G was to leave tomorrow, who would we get? It worries me.
Well, that's the $1 million question, I suppose, in terms of if he was to leave. But what I would say is that I think, David, that we're in a much better place now than we were when Stevie G came in. So the calibre of manager that would want to come to Rangers with, they're not coming to a squad that's really poor, etc. They're coming to a team that has potential and a winning team, etc. So I think that we would have a better scope and a wider scope. Is there anybody out there that you would pinpoint? Probably not, but it's not something that we've considered, is it? So what I would say is Ross Wilson has been brought in to oversee all that kind of thing. So I'm sure that they're looking at people and have a potential shortlist, just like they will have players. If Stevie G, goes to leave in the next couple of years, I would certainly, I would certainly think there would definitely be a more interested base, given that the position that he would leave us in would be a fairly strong one.
Football clubs are a bit like campsites. Leave them in a better place than you found them, and that's a better state than you found them, and that's what Steven Gerrard has done. I agree with you, Stevie. Just to echo the point that think about where we were in 2018, third in the Scottish Premier League, very little income at the time, miles behind Celtic, a joke in Europe. We weren't an attractive proposition to a certain level of manager. Now, though, champions, re-established ourselves financially on a much better footing and in Europe and doing well and showing the opportunities that you can get. So, yeah, I totally agree. I think we are a much better project for a manager coming in because, obviously if you're a Rangers fan then it's different, but we need to tempt people to come to Scotland. I think one of the problems as supporters is that we tend to look about the leagues that we know. I don't think there's anyone in Scotland at the moment, and I say that as somebody who does admire Callum Davidson, and he had an amazing year, but it is 1 year, and it's way, way too early to be talking about a job like Rangers. And, obviously the English Premiership, it's unlikely you're going to get someone from that level. So it probably would be a continental managerial appointment, I think. But you never know. We'll have to wait and see with that. And hopefully it's not a problem that we come up against for a while.
Question 2 comes from David Innes on Patreon. David, this is an interesting one. When do you think the Rangers haters realised that Stevie G was the real deal in terms of bringing Rangers success? And I'll add a wee bit to that. We spoke about this in a way back when the very first episodes about the media reaction towards this, some of the comments and things. When do you think the penny dropped for everyone in terms of Steven Gerrard that is the real deal at Rangers?
For some, I don't think it has yet. I think there's a great deal of delusion going on in Scottish football at the moment. But I think for, shall we say, fair observers of it, then I think you could see with the initial European performance that he knew what he was doing, that this was not going to be a disaster. This was not somebody who was coming in who had ideas but couldn't get them across or had silly ideas. And I think that right from the start, the improvement that Rangers made, I think that any fair observer said, okay, he knows what he's doing. Now, that might not have been enough to convince them that, yeah, he's going to be the man to lead Rangers to glory and to success. And I think for me, it was this season round about, January, February, when it was clear that Rangers were going to go on and win the title, because I think he'd overcome a lot of hurdles, a lot of the questions that would have been in people's mind all through it. Like I say, initially, Rangers weren't a joke straight away when Gerrard came in. He changed that overnight, and we had been before. So you could see he could organise a team. You could see what he wanted to do. I think it was also clear that he improves players. I think you could see that in his time here. But the big question was, of course, Rangers had pretty much collapsed 2 years in the trot after Christmas. So that, for me, was the final hurdle. And could he get over the top into that? And there are still some who say, well, he hasn't won a cup. But to me, that's disingenuous. That's starting from a position of saying, I don't want to admit this, and then looking for evidence for it. Because, yeah, we do want him to do better in cups, but it was about taking Rangers back to the pinnacle of Scottish football. So I would say that if anyone still harbours doubts about his ability as a football coach, a football manager, I think that maybe that's based on other things.
Yeah, there was a second part to this, which is, again, I think it's David Innes on Patreon that asked this, but was it a gradual process or defining moment when the penny dropped? And just to nip in a wee bit, David, I think that given the magnitude of what he faced when he took over, it was always going to be a gradual process in terms of Steven Gerrard, overcoming the hurdles to get the trophy back home. Easier to say it now, but I definitely think that there was many defining moments, like the first victory over Celtic, victory over Parkhead, etc. So I do think it was a gradual process with many defining moments instead of it being either or.
Yeah, I agree. I think the whole thing, the title that we chose for this show, indicates that. I don't ever think it felt like, there were big moments and big signposts. The first season when we beat Ufa, that felt a big moment. And of course, beating Celtic at Ibrox, and then of course beating Celtic at Parkhead. And there were always these moments. But yeah, I always felt it was like an evolutionary process. And we talked about it in the episode. It was quite an emotional episode about that spell after the Tynecastle Cup game where we thought he might leave. I was still convinced that he was the man to get us there. If he believed that, because that interview was worrying, and I think that we all felt, I don't know if he wants to continue. But I always felt that there had been enough signs of progress that we were going in the right direction. I was maybe more in the camp of we're just not going quickly enough, but that we are in the right direction of travel. That, of course, does lead to the question of, well, is he maybe John the Baptist rather than Jesus? Do you know what I mean? Is he the guy that shifts us from being a joke into a competitive force, but we need someone else to come in and take us that next step of the journey? That was a question I thought was more legit about, will he bring us success? I felt that at one point, yes, he definitely would. But would it come quickly enough was I thought a question, and maybe would there be a time where it was advantageous to say thank you for what you've done for us? You've taken us from not to 70, but we need to get to 100, and we've got somebody coming in who'll do that for us. But I always felt that he was somebody who learned and developed and pushed, and obviously it all came to a beautiful full stop. Is that the right term for it? That we could see that, yes, now it has been achieved. But for me, it's always been a learning experience for him and for us and for his players and for the squad as they had to learn to win. And even us as a support, we had to learn how to win again, because we'd been through so much that I think it was important for us to get over that line. And like I say, I think that now that we've done it, then it's been like piercing that bubble that was getting ever bigger and bigger and bigger of pressure. And I think that now that it's gone, I think that you'll find that all of us are in a much better place. Us as a support and them as a player and management team to go on and achieve further success.
I would agree. Perfectly put. There's not much more to add to that one.
In terms of what comes next for the manager, how big a concern is burnout, considering what we've seen from Liverpool, and how do you think the manager will guard against it? That's from Pondo Sinatra on Patreon.
Well, I think it's always a concern for any team at any point. I think that how will we guard against it? I think that more squad rotation, and it comes with having a 3-year process behind you where he can trust more of his squad. We've got stronger squad options as well as being a very strong first 11. There's a strong kind of 12 to 18 there as well. So when we are nipping into the market and bringing in guys like Sakala and Lundstrom, who 3-4 years ago when he first came would have been automatic first choices, but we're looking at them adding some serious strength to the squad. I think that's how we combat it, David. I think that's how we avoid burnout, and it'll be up to the manager to see how he does it. But he does have, we've got a squad now of 30 players, which obviously needs to come down quite a wee bit, but he has plenty of options, and I think that he has plenty of quality options now. When you look at the defence, he's got 6 centre backs. When he looks at full back, he's got Patterson, Tav, Borna, Bassi, etc. There's good options in goals, good options in the middle, and up front we've went from having Morelos to now having Morelos, Roof, Itten, Defoe, Hadji, Sakala, Kent, Scotty Wright. So I think we have a plethora, David, of talent, and that's how he's going to do it. But I also think the good thing as well is that these things will be fresh in his mind because he's a Liverpool fan. He would have seen that, and of course he would have experienced glories of Champions League and things, and having no success in the seasons after it. So he knows what to look out for, and he knows how to manage it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that I'm a great believer in teams, and this maybe goes back to when Walter took over at Rangers, properly in the summer of 1991 and built his own team. He'd obviously guided us to the title just before it, and we had that amazing 2-year period. We won the double in the first year, and we won the treble and the amazing Champions League run the following season, and then there was quite clearly burnout the season after it. So I've always been a great believer that an up and coming team it rises for a bit, and then it will plateau for a period, and then it will start to drop down. And it'll happen to us, inevitably. I just don't believe that it's possible, because there will come a point where you need to bed in new players, and your rivals will probably be at a point in their journey where they're stronger as well. That can happen. So it will happen to us. I think football history tells us that. But I genuinely don't believe, Stevie, that we are even at the plateau stage yet. I think that we're still on the climb.
Yeah, I think when you look at individual players, certainly individual talents like Aribo, Kent, Hadji, they're the immediate ones that spring to mind. Scotty Wright, these are guys that aren't anywhere near their peak yet for Rangers. So there's a lot more to come. Definitely would agree with that.
Question number
4, yeah. So this is John Graham Patterson again, Patreon, and this is a good one. Was there a player signed during Gerrard's time or already there that was let go without getting the proper chance?
Well, you know me, I'll go at my grave thinking Greg Docherty.
I think Greg's the obvious one. If you ignore the big Umar Sadiq going for €60 million, ridiculous stuff.
I'll be honest, I couldn't see that one coming.
Oh, that's crazy. But I think Greg Docherty would have been my answer, mate, as well.
Yeah, and look, the football managers don't deliberately leave out guys that they think are going to come in and help them win. So there will have been reasons, and Steven Gerrard knows more about football than I do. I just really like Greg Docherty as a player, and I think that he's got levels. But sometimes, it's maybe right club, wrong time. That can happen. There's a whole host of factors. But I do think he's a good player, and I think that he will go on and have a really decent career. If the season had continued, a lot of people asked this. Stuart Thomas and Lauren McCrimmon on Patreon were the first, but a lot of people asked this. If the season had continued after the point it stopped due to COVID, would Steven Gerrard have walked away considering the results and how everything was going?
You mentioned it a couple of minutes ago when we spoke about this on the episode. It was quite an emotional kind of, we look back and we spoke about it. I know that you said, you were a massive Gerrard fan at the time. I remember now, and I spoke about this in episodes as well, a very infamous kind of blog that I put out after the Hamilton defeat, and it attacked quite a few of the players, but in it said that we have to stick with Steven Gerrard, and he is the man to take us there. It's just I thought he was being too loyal to certain people. So as far as fans were concerned, I still think on the majority we were still behind them. But to the actual point, it's a really difficult one. It's not one, obviously, David, that we like to think about. But I don't think he would have, because I think that when you look back on his career and where he wants to go, when you look at, what he achieved with Liverpool and possibly, moves to Chelsea and things, and he's always very loyal, very committed, very strong in what he believes in. So I think he was hurting, like all of us. He was hurting at that point. I think that it was a very difficult moment for him. I would say, I hand in heart, I would say no, but I don't think, with that at the same time, David, I don't necessarily think we would have, had a barnstorming finish to the season in terms of him quickly kind of turning it around on that. I think that he possibly would have learned more about certain individuals, and they might have found form or not found form. So I think maybe it saved a lot more than just Steven Gerrard, and that's a nice way of putting it, because I think maybe certain players who were in a right slump, were allowed to go away, galvanise, get themselves a better frame of mind and things. So it's not only a question about Gerrard, it's also a question about the players. But the way they turned it round, was magnificent, obviously. Would he have walked away in answer instead of waffling on like I am? No, I don't believe he would have.
I want to circle back to something you said in your answer, Stephen, because I thought it was a really, really important point, and one that I think needs mentioned. And that was that although there was a lot of concern among supporters, and there was a fair few fans who thought it's time for change, I don't think we'd reached tipping point. I don't think we'd reached that critical mass of supporters saying, nah, I don't believe in him, I've given up on him. But we'd Celtic to play twice. Had we lost both those games, and even worse, had it maybe been a heavy defeat or a couple of heavy defeats, would that have changed it? And would the atmosphere at grounds have been a little bit ugly? I don't think he would have walked away lightly, but obviously if he got the impression that the fans didn't want him there, would that have been different? Now, the opposite could have happened. We could have won all our games and Celtic could have collapsed and we could have won the league. We'll never know. It's a total, what if moment. Personally, I don't think we would have got scudded, but I don't think we would have come back and won the league either. And I don't know. It saved it getting worse. It stopped it getting better as well, but it also saved it getting worse. Where we are now, we can sit and say that it worked out absolutely perfectly for us, because it gave them time and space to go away and focus and realise maybe that we were closer than we thought we were. But yeah, it absolutely could have. It could have degenerated into a situation where, for everyone's sake, that the manager sat down with the board at the end of the season and say, look, the fans have given up on me, and I don't have their trust, and therefore I think it's better for everyone if I go. Equally, it could have gone the other way, and he could have had the best comeback since Helicopter Sunday. But I just think that it is probably better that we just, as you say, the sliding doors moment, we just go phew and be glad how it did work out.
Question 6 is from Ross French on Patreon. He asks, this is impossible to answer, I think, but he asks, who is Steven Gerrard best signing at Rangers and who is the most improved?
Oh, wow. That is a good question.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm going to say that his best signing, and I'm going to go on here pound for pound. Well, Alan McGregor, but there will always be that suspicion that he was somebody who was lined up anyway. And Gerrard okayed it, obviously, but a guy who was an absolute Gerrard signing, I would say, is Connor Goldson. And I think, his contribution over the 3 years that he's been there has been huge. For me, though, the most improved is Glenn Kamara. Not because he was rubbish, but we were signing a guy from Dundee. Okay, let's not forget that. I know we go 50 grand. I know he was going to be out of contract, but he was coming from Dundee, and now we wouldn't be happy if he left the club for less than £20 million. That is an improvement.
Yeah. So the great thing, David, is that this is very subjective into your own personal opinion, because you could name 6 or 7. Look at Borna when he first came, and then we know his story, and look at him now. You look at Tav, look how much he's improved. Goldson, obviously. Hollander's been exceptional. Then you look in the middle, Stephen Davis. Yeah. And there's so many. I'll look at the Alfredo. Alfredo, Ryan Kent. Look how good Ryan Kent is now. Obviously,
Alfredo's improvement is
phenomenal. Phenomenal. Obviously, his best signing is Scott Wright.
Of course.
So we'll gloss past that. But I don't know. In all seriousness, I would tend to say Connor Goldson as well, given the defensive situation we were in at the time, and he was the rock we needed, and his overall improvement, David, to be this one last year who was almost robotic, like not a mistake in him from where he went. He was a leader, he was everything that we needed. So as I said, it's subjective. There is so many, and I think that highlights just what a good job the management have done as well. So that's a great question.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to sit here and try and pretend that everyone's been brilliant all the time and it's just been a straight upward curve. There's been dips in form. There's been times that Goldson was very poor, as the whole team were, just before the COVID shutdown. That's a fact. Steven Davis, there were a couple of times when you were looking at it and going, is it maybe one season too many for him? So there were ups and downs for everyone, but I just think overall, as you say, I go back to the last game before Gerrard, 5-5 with Hibs, and we were a shambles at the back. Ooh. And no matter what happened the following season, we were never that, bar maybe one game in Moscow. That apart, we were always decent. So yeah, a really good question though. I absolutely agree with that one. Okay, this one comes from Gordon Somerville on Patreon. He says, how big and how important was winning the Friendly Cup in France last year to set the mindset and tone ahead of winning more last season?
Well, on the face of it, it wasn't really that important at all to Rangers, etc. But to those players who were mentally maybe a wee bit fragile from what went on, 2 really good results, David, as well, 2 good performances. I think in terms of where we were at that point, yeah, it was important, and it also sets a mindset, that we are a good side, we can play well, we can do well, and it would have given them a wee bit of encouragement, a wee bit of belief as well. So, although this is Rangers, we don't want to sit here and say, a friendly tournament in France was really important and really big, but it's a great point, because see, in a weird way, it probably was exactly what we needed at that point, for a squad-wise, for individual-wise as well. So, good. Again, it's a good point. It was important. I'm not going to overly play it, but definitely important to where we were at the time, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't tend to set a great deal of importance in friendlies. I think they are about fitness, but if you're getting cuffed in them, it's going to damage your confidence. And obviously, if you're winning and playing well, and Rangers did, then that helped. I'm not sure winning it really mattered particularly, because it was only it was a 4-team tournament and you didn't play one of the other teams. So I don't think it was the players were that they took any great. Right now we've won this, we can go on and win other things. I don't think that happened. From what I'm told, some of the players walked off the field. They didn't realise they got a trophy at the end of it. So I don't think it was huge in that regard. But confidence building, absolutely. I think we all felt, we'd beat Lyon, a really good side. We'd watched them not that long before beat Manchester City, of course. So, yeah, of course you take confidence from that, and I think that we very much did.
Yeah, so next one, David. There was a lot of questions like this. I would think that a lot of people concerned, what happened next. Alan Ryder, again, Patreon asks, if this is kind of 3 parts as well, David, so I'll run through them. But if Gerrard goes, does the whole backroom staff go? How does Ross Wilson solve that? And will he look for entirely new backroom staff? If that's the case, some of them stay, or is it all separate? So there's a lot to that, David.
I was always of the opinion that if Gerrard goes, they all go. I was always of that opinion. But I'm not 100% sure now that that is the case. No. I'm not saying that it definitely isn't either. I'm just saying I've moved a bit from the absolutely. I was, convinced they were here as a unit, and when he left, they went with him. I was convinced of that, dead set. And now I'm not so sure. I think if opportunities opened up at Rangers for some of the people in the coaching staff, that they would certainly consider it. And again, they might still decide to go with Gerrard. What does Ross Wilson will know better than me the script with that. And secondly, I think that he'll be talking to them, so he'll have a much better idea than I do about that. If it is the case and they do all go, or if some of them stay and get promoted, then in terms of bringing in a new backroom team, you have to let a manager bring his backroom team in. You don't have to let him do a Sam Allardyce and bring in, 23 people he brings in when he arrives at a club. I don't think you have to do that, but I do think you need to say to him, right, you pick your number 2, your head coach, your fitness guy. I do believe that has to happen. Yes, at any club, at any managerial, I don't think it's ever a great idea to put somebody in, because generally speaking, when you're looking for a new manager at our club, it's because the previous person has left for a reason, and usually that reason is disappointment. So to keep the same coaches who played a part in that disappointment, I don't particularly see the benefit in. But the other situation that's different is Souness. If Gerrard was to go, if Gerrard was to go and Michael Beale was to put his hand up and apply for the job, and things had been going really well and the board thought he was an important part of it and had the skills for the job, then I don't think anyone would be upset. Equally, if we had a disastrous season and things went really badly and Gerrard left, and Michael Beale, just for example, Michael Beale, it could be Tom Culshaw or whatever, but if they put their hand up, that would change it. So it'll depend on circumstances when it happens, who it's to. Of course, I think there's always been an assumption of who it might be, but that isn't necessarily going to be the case. So yeah, I think it's a fluid situation. I'm sure there's been some discussions with Ross Wilson about that, about what the next steps will be, and I'm sure that there's always some succession planning goes on in any business.
Yeah, I hate to sound like the kind of nodding dog that agrees, but I don't. I'm like you. I think it's a fluid one, and the next question is kind of similar to ones we've had as well, David. So I think it's on the same theme.
Yeah, it's where do you think that Ross Wilson, the board and the club are at with this prospect now of Gerrard leaving? Will they be planning for that? And that's from Stuart McDonald on Patreon.
It goes a wee bit back to the one we answered before in terms of, I think every good club has a successive plan, but I think that I don't think it would happen suddenly. Like, I don't think Steven Gerrard suddenly coming in tomorrow and walking out. I think the club will be given fair warning, in which case they will have an idea. That's Ross Wilson's job. He does it well, I believe, just like signing. So I don't think overly need to go over that, David. Is not a criticism of the question or anything. Just we've slightly covered it as well. And to be honest, I don't want to talk about him leaving. So
no,
I'm not ready.
That.
I'm not ready for that yet, David.
Nope, totally agree.
So the next one, this is a good one as well. In terms of, it comes from Davey on Patreon. So he says, what is your expectation for this season? He's a wee bit worried that he's heading towards another 93-94 season, and we may have to wait for Champions League qualification.
Well, that obviously could happen, the Champions League qualification, because you're going to have tough matches and anything can happen in that. It's not exactly a lottery, but a key injury or a COVID outbreak or a sending off early. Things can happen in these matches. We get that. So nobody knows. I don't think we're heading for a 93-94 yet. I think there will be a season that comes along like that where players are maybe struggling for form or showing a bit of fatigue. But I don't think we're there yet. As I say, I think the last year more is our 91-92, our breakthrough season, and I think this year will be, the continual improvement season. Does that then mean that maybe next year, possibly, but I just think right now we're in a good spot. I don't think that, the only team that could rival us for the title are in a good spot. And I think that those combined more than enough to give us the kind of start that we'll need. Champions League, yeah. Obviously, right now we can only look ahead to the first tie that we've got, which will be against either Malmo or HJK Helsinki. At the time of recording, it sits 2-1. No away goals, obviously, now, but the next leg in Helsinki. So I don't think we can even guarantee who we're going to come up against. And then we'll need to just take that game as it comes, as they say. But yeah, I still think that we have a lot to be positive in terms of the side. I think that the side will have enough about it this year to go on and retain its title. But we will inevitably see a dip at one point, Stevie. It's just not possible that we won't.
Yeah, I would agree, but I think he's asking the wrong people in terms of if he's worried about a slump in the Champions League and that, because as people know, we're mega positive anyway. So, I'm looking forward to a really positive season, and I'm looking forward to and hoping for Champions League qualification. I know we've got to be respectful, David, to Malmo and Helsinki, who are first up in that, but we should really scud them. And I don't mean that to sound bad, but I think we're at that level now where we're well above where they are.
I think we should be, yeah, and I think
we should, definitely should be. So yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I'm, I know it's going to be a harder draw after that if we get there, hopefully, but I'm ready for it, and I know how good we can be. So no, I appreciate what you said, but it is, what I'm like. I'm positive and looking forward to the season ahead. So
here's one for you then, just on that. Now the chances are, at some point, we're going to lose a league match. Right, it probably is going to happen statistically. Last season was the unusual one. Do we as supporters have to play our part a little bit and maybe try not to overreact, or is it just simply inevitable in this age of Twitter, social media, and yes, podcasts and blogs, that the focus will be huge and intense, and there will be the kind of almost post-Livy reaction that we saw last season?
Well, I feel slightly attacked, David, because is that aimed towards me? Because no, I'm kidding.
I'm just saying. I'm not having people say that we're hypocrites, right? Because we can't sit here and say, oh, there's so much attention as we're sitting recording a Rangers podcast. So it's just about we admit, yeah, we're very much a part of that as well. But it will happen, right? I hope it doesn't. Chances are at some point it probably will, especially if we do make the Champions League, incidentally, because there's it's going to be very demanding on the old legs. I
would say to that then, mate, genuinely I'd hope that we as a fan base are in a better place in terms of the pressure's off as the league has been delivered. So it will happen. I agree with you. I think it's an almighty ask to go through the year again unbeaten. I would swap that right now for a couple of cups in the league being retained, by the way. No problem at all. But I would say that I hope that if and when it does happen, we don't do what we normally do. But as you said, it's social media and things. I think there will be. It goes back to a wee bit like last season when we drew against Motherwell in February time, and it was just a case of, it's happened, it's okay, and it wasn't the kind of ferociousness it has before. I would hope that people were relaxed and take it, because you can't win every game, you can't go unbeaten all for years. So no, I would be hopeful that we as a fan base are a wee bit more relaxed than where we were previously. You see that edge, that kind of desperate edge, David, to win something. I would hope and believe that would go or be gone now to enjoy a wee bit more where we are.
Thomas on Patreon asked, do you think we've benefited from no loans in season 2021 like Ojo or that blonde goon from Forest who played no matter what? I think he means Joe Worrell, and I don't think he likes him.
No, and we know who Thomas is, so that's very, very him. So
I call him Moaning Lisa, so, his favourite song is Moni Moni by Billy Idol.
Well, I work with him, so
He's a big moaner.
Have we benefited? Well, I think the loan players done all right for us. I wouldn't be overly critical of any of the loan ones. Especially since we've got Ryan Kent. I think it's more, again, it kind of fits in with what we're doing now. It's more like the evolution of the squad in terms of we don't need loan players now. Before we needed them, I don't think we do now. I think the squad's strong enough. I think we've got a scouting, in place. Whereas we might have had loans this year, David. We've went and got Sakala and Lundstrom, so we're exploring the free transfers and doing better that way. Have we benefited from it? If they're good enough and we're getting them on loan, I still don't mind. If you would have said to me, and obviously I'm biased, but if you had said we could have got wee Billy up on loan for the year, I would have taken that and I would have been overjoyed with that signing. So if they're good enough and they're available even for loan, I think it would be naive for a club like ours not to explore everything available. So, no, have we benefited? I liked Tojo. I thought he did very quickly kind of go off the boil. Worrell was a bit hit and miss. Again, had a few mistakes in him, but I think that if Joe Worrell played beside Goldson now, he would benefit from a much better player. So I hate to disagree with Mo Powell, but I'm going to disagree on this one. I don't know what you think.
I think it's a tough one. I think that if you are loaning players that are very good players who just aren't getting picked by the squad, say it's an English team and they've got a huge squad and a guy's a wee bit out of favour, and you can pick him up for a year, that's maybe different to bringing in an academy player on loan where they aren't the finished article. They are going to make errors. That's why the club are sending you there, a guy like that. So a guy like, Worrell, Ojo, these guys, they're not going to play well every week. They're up here to do that. That's one of the reasons they're on loan. And you're right, we don't need to take players like that anymore. Whereas at the time we did, financially we needed to do that to boost to just boost the squad. Wouldn't be averse to a loan, as I say, of a really good player who just wasn't getting game time at his parent club because they've got so much money and a squad of 8,000, as we see. But I do think maybe the advantage is in that I think when things are bad, then if you're a loan player, you have an escape and you can have that at the back of your mind. I think you can say, well, I'm going back in 3 months, 4 months or whatever. So I don't really need to worry. And I think you can kind of hold yourself slightly above that. When I don't mean be arrogant, I just mean that you have at the back of your mind, well, this isn't as bad for me as it is for them. Whereas I think for all the other players, when you're permanent and you've decided to sign on with this club for X amount of years, then I think you're just a wee bit more committed to it. And I think that's just human nature. It's the difference between, having a full-time contract at a job and maybe a short-term contract at a job. I've done both, and I know that you have more ownership and more kind of pride of establishment when you're permanent. So maybe that, but I just think we've moved past the days of taking academy players on loan from England and try to polish them up a bit and send them back. I don't think that we're in that market anymore.
I would agree with that. It's a wee bit like the Ajaria situation, isn't it? Who could have been, I believe that he had the same sort of skill set as Joe Rebo, but very quickly kind of put the towel in and decided that he didn't like the pressure and that was for him. So I would agree with that as well, David. Brings us nicely on to the next one, actually, Ryan on Patreon, asking how has Gerrard evolved from player recruitment point of view. He thinks that he's learned a lot, and that leads into he believes that less loans, etc., have been better from the squad. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, to go back to that, I don't think that Gerrard arrived in summer 2018 and thought, let's get lots of loans. He wants players to come in and work with and be his player and be committed to him. it was just the reality of the situation. We had to get 14 players in that summer. And when you can bring in a loan deal, one, there's not a huge financial commitment to it. Two, I think it's quite common for a manager to go back to a previous club, which he did for obviously Kent and Nigeria, and get players that they've worked with before. But I think what he's learned perhaps is that there's a certain type of player that will do well in Scotland, and that talent alone isn't really enough. Like, I've got no doubt that Eros Grezda is a talented player, but didn't work out. Umar Sadiq clearly is a good player. He's got ability that we never saw, but he just, I think, took one look at the Scottish game and went, nah, this isn't for me. So I think that the type of player that we need to bring in, he looks at and says, yeah. So, for instance, a Lundstrom is a guy that you look at and you think, yeah, he's got the physical attributes to play in our league. And again, just as the squad's got better, that we don't have as many holes to fill, so we don't need to maybe balance stuff out. Whereas now we can maybe wait for one quality player, as opposed to saying, I need to take 3 players who are not as good because I've got 3 needs in the squad. I think that's helped.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would probably add to that as well, that in agreement with what you're saying, it goes back to what we needed when he first came in, and we needed 20 players, and you can't do that in one window. And that was something that we were trying to say, that the club were trying to get out to the fans, that this wasn't a one season, one window thing. So I think we can be more, picky about who we need now. It's definitely a case of quantity is no longer needed, it's quality. So no, I would agree with that. And David, I know that this is your next one, but this is aimed for you, so I'm going to ask you this, if that's all right. It comes from Lisa on Patreon. It's a really good one as well. It gives us a wee insight into a lot of work that you've done this year. And you, David, she remembers you saying that Gerrard was very charged on Euro nights. So she wanted to know what it was like interviewing Steven Gerrard and getting your questions to him on the really big nights like Benfica and things like that.
He's in the zone. He's very much in the zone, and there's an edge to him. Is how I would describe it. You can see there's like a laser-like focus, and I think that you can tell that he's very, very much up there. I think he's got that intensity about him anyway. I think he's naturally an intense person when it comes to football, but you can absolutely spot the difference in him between that and, say, like a normal press conference, because at a normal press conference, believe it or not, a lot of it gets cut out of the videos that go out. He will have a laugh and a joke with the press, and he'll sit and banter back and forth, and he tends to be a wee bit more patient with people, whereas I think on European nights, especially just after the game, he's incredibly intense. After any of the matches, he's very, very much someone that you just can sense as soon as he walks into the room. You can, you feel the charge, you feel the electricity off him, and I think that happens to a lot of managers. I think when we sit and watch a Pep Guardiola or a Thomas Tuchel, you can see the difference between them on a non-match day and a match day. It is huge, and I think that Gerrard has that as well. I think he's training Steven over the years of being a guy who's played so many big matches that I think his body rhythms are suited to it, so that he peaks at the right times. I think it's a second nature thing to him now. I think he just goes into huge game mode. Old Firm days are the same. He's exactly the same, where you just know that he is absolutely at the peak of what he's doing, and he's laser like in his intensity.
I would add, just before I get to the second part as well, is obviously I've done wee bits and pieces, and something that we covered as well in the series is just the stature of Gerrard is when he walks in a room or when he sits and does questions and things like that. He is very like Walter Smith. He commands the room. You've got ultimate respect for him already. A lot different, as we spoke about again, in case people haven't heard it, we spoke about the difference between him and Gary Mack. When Gary takes the pressers, it's a lot more relaxed. He's a lot more laid back. So it's not a bad thing. We spoke about that, obviously. But she goes on to ask David, who does the talking on the sidelines? Because and hopefully they don't swear as much as Alan McGregor. So give us a wee bit of an insight, if you can, into the sidelines, and also tell us. You've told me so many good stories about McGregor as well. It's a good time to get one of them in.
I think they all do. They all not constantly. None of them are constant shouters. Like there was a game, 2 games at Ibrox last season where you could sit and obviously watch because of no noise at all, really, other than what was coming from the pitch. And I remember, and I'm not being critical of the guy, I don't know him from Adam. I'm just saying that the guy who I found really unimpressive was Mickey Mellon of Dundee United, where it was just a non-stop stream of rubbish, really. David Martindale, for example, is a big talker, but it's always about the game. Whereas with Mellon, it's just irrelevant, to the point where I thought he's actually putting his players off, because imagine you're facing, watch the first goal against Dundee United in the 4-0 win at Ibrox earlier in the season. And if you see the SPFL footage, I remember this really clearly, Ryan Kent is tearing in at his centre defence, and Mellon ran down the touchline shouting at him, there he is, watch him, there's your work, you know what to do. And I was going, just shut up. He's got Ryan Kent coming at him at full pelt, and of course Kent waltzes past them and scores a goal. So none of them are like that. It's not like a constant stream of drivel, but if they see something, happening, Gerrard will shout, Culshaw will shout something occasionally to a player, especially if a set piece is coming up. Tom Culshaw will do that. Gary McAllister will shout things if he's noticing something. Michael Beale clearly across doing tactical instructions. So they all have the freedom to do that, but none of them are, as I say, just right, I'm going to just talk for talking's sake. They don't do that because they watch the game as, to see what's happening. I think you've got to give yourself room to do that. And they do that. Alan McGregor, he is just absolutely magnificent. He's just a guy who, when he's on the field, he's talking is just constantly. I think that we all know that the ban he got for that Aberdeen game rankles with him highly. And at any time that there's a bad tackle in a game, you'll hear him for the referee from 40 yards away going, I get 2 games for that. And it clearly still annoys him to this day. So he's brilliant. But he'll get on his own team as well. I remember the last game of the season against Aberdeen, we're 3-0 up. We're waiting on the title procession, really. The title, they're getting the stuff out of the side to get ready for it. And Ryan Kent dawdled on the ball, and McGregor ran out his goal, and he's like, Raza, what the fuck was that? And I just thought, winner. Really that simple.
I always remember the clip of him, which he heard on Rangers. I'm sure it was inside the show that Rangers put out, of the tackle by Curtis Main on Borna Barisic up at Pittodrie when we won 2-1 just after Christmas time. And like you said, he was just hilarious. That's the problem with the referees in Scotland. So inconsistent. I got 2 like you say, I got 2 games for that. And how fucking high does that need to be before you're going to send him off, etc. So
is that no dangerous? Is that no reckless?
That's it. Yeah, and he's unreal.
But even at corner kicks and stuff, you'll just hear him piping up and going, this guy's got enough room to build a wall, and somebody will go over and mark him. He keeps on at them, and he's absolutely brilliant.
You're right, it's a winner. So
that's exactly that. I'll take this one then, mate. Can you think of another manager who could have come in and done what Steven Gerrard has done? I think many would have struggled to adapt tactics and players in such a short space of time, and I believe it's his biggest strength, and that's from Graham Roy on Patreon.
No. That's the honest answer. There was nobody at that time who had the stature, who had the who was able, David, to have the balls to come in and do it. Because, right, we know that Gerrard, we know what he's like, and we've tried to kind of put it across as well, the stature of him and stuff, but he's obviously got the right amount of arrogance and self-belief in himself. So he wasn't taking, we hark back on to 2018, he wasn't walking into a job that was easy. He's walking into a club and a squad that standards were dramatically down to where they shouldn't be. And we needed somebody that had that stature and had that, self-belief that could have come in. And I don't think at that point there was anybody that was getting linked for the job that you would have said, yeah, he could have come in and done a Steven Gerrard job. I
think you and I can get, it's been long enough, I think, now that you and I can maybe give away something that was true. But the list that McInnes had topped, there were guys, I know you know this, we discussed it at the time, that list included people like Derek Adam and Darren Ferguson.
Oh.
Now, how frightening is that? And remember, of course, that the first choice on that list knocked the job back. So that was the sort of level that we were contemplating, and thankfully we didn't go for. But that is frightening, really. And as you and I discussed the weekend, actually, see, when you look on it, it was madness for Steven Gerrard to take this job, given the circumstances, given the state Rangers were in and what we were asking him to do. We basically said to him, look, we're miles and miles behind our rivals. Our support are agitated to the point of, ready to storm the gates. They're so desperate for success. We need you to get that success. Oh, by the way, you've got kind of half the budget of the other side who've just won everything for X amount of years. It's crazy. And I think that goes back to your point, character, belief, inner strength. Yeah, you need to be a good coach, but I think to manage Rangers successfully, there's an X factor, and we might not be able to identify it easily, but we all know it when we see it, and I think he has it.
Yeah, I think great expression. Walter had it, Graham Souness had it, even Alex McLeish had it.
Dick had it, yeah.
To that or Dick Advocaat had it as well, obviously. Great point. Brings us on nicely. This is a wee bit different, David, and it's really, really relevant to what we're talking about. William Aston on Patreon, he makes a point, and we can turn this into a bit of a question as well. He says that he listened to Gerrard on Jim White's TalkSport show, and he said a full review of the club would now happen, and that would basically came days after we stopped for COVID. And he said he was going to go right down to the very bottom of where we could improve, and he would make sure he could be ready. And he felt that it galvanised him, galvanised his support, and he felt from that moment it kind of changed everything. It was more or less the perfect uplifting that he needed after the way the season had been brought to a halt. That's more of a statement from him in terms of that, but it's something that we didn't cover, David. And it's a really big point in terms of, I think when you look at Gerrard and as a leader and as a manager, I think it shows the effect that he can have with his words and how he can, and how he has that stature to galvanise a whole support in that. What do you make of the whole Jim White thing and what William was making, the point he was making there?
I think it's a very good point. I think that, clearly something massive changed. There was a sea change in attitude because Rangers come out the next season looking different. And I know that we all said, even when it was going well, I'm not getting ahead of myself until after Christmas because we've seen this before. But they did seem, and this is not hindsight because people were discussing it on the Patreon site, on Twitter, you were discussing it in your blogs, they just seemed to carry themselves differently with more assurance. And I think it was maybe forged in fire a wee bit, Stephen. The end of that previous season and just how difficult it was, and then how difficult life was for all of us. They're humans as well, They were going through the same thing. Zoom calls, not allowed out the house, and it doesn't matter that they're footballers. They were going through all that as well. And then the way that footballers were having to live in terms of bubbles and whatnot, and very strict protocols, that there was just something forged in that. And I think that there was a feeling of, we've come through this together, both as squad players and the management team. And there was this feeling of, I think, that, look, we've overcome that adversity. Now, we could have buckled and we haven't. Half a dozen of us could have been playing at a different club this season. The manager could have been somewhere else, but we're not. We're all still here. And if we can get through that, we can get through anything. And I think that happened. But that is, an emotional thing. And abstract things do matter in sport, and they do matter in life. And it's a case here. But it's not enough. You can't win titles on rhetoric and good words alone. There were technical things that happened too, absolutely. There were things that I'm sure they looked at, and not all of it negatively, you know what I mean? I don't think that everything was, right, that's rubbish and needs to be changed and that. I think that they were able to say, actually, you know what, we're not far away with that. This is maybe what we need to do to improve it. That does need change, but this actually is fine. This is working for us. So I think there was that whole overview. They were able to step back, because when you're right at the coalface of a season with Rangers, it never, ever, ever lets up. It took a pandemic, these exceptional circumstances, 3 months of inertia for the planet, for them to have that space to be able to say, right, we'll go back. Because imagine that the season had played out and we just had a normal summer with the Euros and whatnot, all the transfer business. You never get time like that. And it was how you use it. And I am going to, we try not to talk about that lot too often because they're so far in their slipstream, but they didn't use that time. They dawdled. They marked time. They got worse through it. The entropy set in with them. Whereas I think Rangers used that time to smooth out processes, repair broken ones, strengthen ones that did work. And then, as I say, along with that mental, we've come through this period of adversity, I think what you had was a very efficient squad that had been bonded together.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, actually, I think it, maybe repeat myself slightly, but I think it speaks volumes for the stature of Steven Gerrard himself when he can deliver an interview like that, weeks after how it had ended for us, which was very grim. And he can galvanise and mobilise, a support the way he did for that. So, no, again, I think a great point. And it does, it speaks a lot for Gerrard, I think.
Who had the bigger impact last season, Jack or Arfield, from Big Willie Style on Patreon? And he said, also looking to this season, who of them is going to play more given their injury situations, etc.? I'm glad you're getting this one.
The answer is that they both had a massive impact at different points in the season. Scotty Arfield had a run from September to November before he got injured where he was sensational. Ryan Jack, similarly, just around about that time finishing, he was very steady. And when it came to October, November, December, he was exceptional. Both, unfortunately, picked up kind of nasty injuries. The thing with, do you know why I would plump for Arfield on this, David? And it's probably unfair on Ryan Jack, because Ryan Jack was consistently very good. But I looked at Scott Arfield at the start of the season as being a bit part player. And his form made him undroppable. And he was getting in ahead of Joe Aribo and things. So I think his appetite, and he's somebody that I really enjoy listening to speaking as well. When he spoke at the end of the season, just after we beat Aberdeen, he spoke about how the squad were already determined to right the wrongs of the cups and things like that going into next season. So I can see him being a big part of the dressing room. And that's not a slight on Ryan Jack. It's just that maybe he puts himself forward for more interviews and things. He's more vocal, but I think that could be something that he brings into the changing room as well, a leader Maybe not McGregor, Goldson, but you need different types, and I think he would be one as well. Looking to this season, who's going to play more? I hope they're both available. Scotty Arfield's already fit. Ryan Jack's got a bit more to come back. I'm really desperate for Ryan Jack to get over his problems. I think we're going to have to be patient with him, though. I'm not sure that he's ever going to be in the position where he can play 50, 60 games for Rangers like Stephen Davis does. Mm-hmm. But I hope we can get to the point where we can bring in Lundstrom, for example, for games that we can rotate him and things like that. So I think we're better placed to handle or manage Ryan Jack, certainly this season. I don't have a favourite between them. I think they're both vitally important, and they're two players that I really like.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that Arfield had the bigger on-field part last season, because there were times that he was just in sensational form, and he was unlucky really that when injuries came along he was absolutely flying. So for me, Ryan Jack did play his part, of course. I mean, the goal against Kilmarnock, crucial. What a goal it was, incidentally, just beautiful. But what I will say though about Ryan Jack is at the end of last season, Rangers ran an online coaching thing. I'm sure some of you might have seen, and I bought the package so that I could watch because I'm interested in that side of the game, and I'm a geek who never leaves the house, so I've got time to watch it. And there was an interview at the end of the week with Steven Gerrard and Gary McAllister. And Steven Gerrard was he waxed lyrical about Ryan Jack, and I've heard him do that before. But in this, he was, such a huge presence in the dressing room, and he's so important, and he helps me get across, my message, and he gets it, and then he takes it forward, and he leads, and he makes sure the other boys do it as well. So what I will say is that I think that while there's a chance of Ryan Jack getting fit, you'll always have an opportunity under Steven Gerrard, because I think Gerrard rates him as a professional and as a man. This is maybe something that we don't, talk a lot about. Steven, that's a term he uses quite a bit. If you watch interviews with him, folk, and think back, it's something. But he'll talk about he's a man. It's a real bit of praise from him, and I think what he means by that is that he conducts himself in the way that Steven Gerrard considers right for a footballer to do. And I think that's a big praise thing for him when he says it. So, yeah, I think if Ryan Jack was to get fit, he would play more than Arfield, just because he does a different position with maybe not quite so much competition. Scotty Arfield playing that bit further up where we are, kind of blessed with some real talented players. But I just hope they both deserve an injury-free season. If anybody did, it's these two guys. That's a good one, Stevie. That's from Graham McKenzie on Patreon. He says, what would you think about offering the job to McAllister or Beale? It's worked before with Smith if Steven Gerrard leaves.
I wouldn't be overly against it, but there would be the alarm bells ringing in terms of Ali McCoist getting it. Now, I know that Ali got it under horrible circumstances, and we'll never know how good Ali could have been if he had a better boardroom and an owner behind him, etc. But I would be a wee bit battle scarred and a wee bit worried about that. But in terms of is either of them capable of doing the job, then absolutely I think they would be. I think, ironically, David, and this maybe left field, but I would be more intent to give it to Michael Beale than I would be to give it to Gary McAllister. Sometimes people are just really good assistants. I think Gary McAllister is a really good assistant. I think Michael Beale is a natural progression to be. Michael Beale has an aura around him that I think is similar. He's not Steven Gerrard level, but he has an aura and a respect from the players around him. And I'm not saying that Gary Mack doesn't, but I just think that Beale, to me, seems to be the natural progressor to Steven Gerrard. That's based on somebody that doesn't see them every day, doesn't know the ins and outs. So it could be really unfair on Gary Mack, me saying that. But it just, when I watch Michael Beale, when I listen to him speak, I love listening to him talk about tactics and things like that. For me, he's the natural one out of the two from what I've seen. But that's it's
no,
that's opinion based.
100% agreement with you on that one. I don't think Gary McAllister would be or would see himself as a contender for the manager's job. I think Gary, he's been about football. He's had some managerial jobs. He is an excellent number two, and it is a skill set. Incidentally, it is a specific thing. Not everyone can do it, and he's very, very good at it. But I don't think he sees himself in that, and I don't think that he would be in line for it. Michael Beale is different. He has coaching ambitions. He's spoken about this on his own blog, which is excellent, and he's spoken about it in interviews that he does have ambitions, and that's what I mean about in the old days I was kind of convinced they would all go as one. I think with Michael Beale, just based on listening to him and reading directly from him, that he does have coaching ambitions of his own to be his own man. So I don't think he'll be forever with I don't think if Steven Gerrard has a 20-year coaching career that Michael Beale will be with him for 20 years. And therefore, I do. I think, and I think we all know, and it's no denigration at all to any of the rest of the coaching staff. They work well as a team. I think we all know how important Michael Beale is in terms of Rangers tactics and how they set up and the training, etc. Then there would be other skills you need. We've talked about mental toughness, the ability to deal with all that comes at you being the Rangers manager. But it would definitely be in consideration, I think, and I don't think the fans would be wildly against it either if Steven Gerrard leaves on the back of success, as I say, rather than maybe worse.
Yeah, I would agree. This is probably a great final question, David, I think, in terms of where we are with time and the episode, etc. But this is a brilliant one, I think. Comes from Dale Renton, also on Patreon as well. What does Steven Gerrard see as his ultimate achievable goal with Rangers?
I think that he sees as his ultimate achievement goal with Rangers to be in a position that when he does decide to leave, that A, he decides to leave rather than it's decided for him, and B, that when he does so, Rangers are at the top and indisputably at the top, that they are the number one team in Scotland. Not club. That will always be a matter for debate between, if you're a Rangers fan, you think it's us. If you're a Celtic fan, you think it's them. We're right. But, I'm talking about, but just nobody can say they're not the best team in Scotland. And I think that's what he wants to do. So how do you make that concrete? Well, you do it by multiple league titles, not just one. You do it by cups and winning cups and trebles. And you do it, of course, by getting to the Champions League. And the great thing about Steven Gerrard is I don't think he's the type of guy who would get us through the qualifying rounds and think, well done, that's me achieved it. He'll want to get us out of that and into the next round.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that he's created a legacy. He'll want to cement it now. Exactly what you said. And like I go back to something that Steven Gerrard said in February time, just before the Antwerp game. He said that he wants to get Rangers into the stage where they're competing in the final stages of European competition every single year. So like you, I think he might short term see Champions League qualification, but ultimately he's looking at after Christmas, last 32, etc. And I see him as being, the way we performed and the gradual steps, and as we've spoke about on this series, I wouldn't be surprised, David, if we're sitting next summer adding the next chapter to this, because he's not somebody that will stand still. He's not somebody that will be content. I think he's always going to be driving and striving for more. And I still think he's here to. I think he's got a lot more unfinished business at Rangers before he considers his next move also.
I go right back to something that he said in the summer of 2018, and it stayed with me, and I've thought about it quite often throughout his time here. He was asked about signing a 4-year deal because it seemed quite a long deal for him to take at that point. And he said, I asked for a 4-year deal. And I remember being happy because I thought, well, that shows you the commitment that he's got to the club, that he's not just here for, a quick fix for a year or two and then off-ski, a la, Lampard at Derby. And he said in the interview, I asked for a 4-year deal because that's how long it will take to make Rangers the best team, not simply a team that can win a trophy here and there, but to be the best team. And that's struck with me. Now, that's not to say that he'll get to 4 years and leave, right? Because he signed an extension since. But I think that, I don't know, it's always just reassured me that, he knew we'd be where we are right now, and that we are still on that plan where, yeah, we've won a trophy, and yeah, we're a great side, and yeah, we're the best in the country, but we've still a ways to go. Yeah. And therefore, I refer back to that statement quite a bit, and it fills me with hope for continued success moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Great way to finish it, I think.
Great way to finish tonight. Now, Stephen and I had talked about this before the show, folks, and what we said is if we can't get through the questions, we've got probably the same amount again to go, that we'll wrap them up in another show next week. So that is what we'll do. Stevie, a pleasure. Great questions from the listeners, I thought. Yeah,
brilliant questions. It's just, you know what, David, I say this and I try and say it. The show has been an absolute pleasure to do, to be with yourself on Heart and Hand. It has been brilliant, but the reaction we've had, and we're halfway through the questions, and everybody getting involved, and the feedback we've had, and everything that people have said to us, and taking their time to kind of join the show makes it what it is. So, absolutely thanks very much for everyone that's listening and sent them in. We're having a ball doing it. And, to be able to be sitting, going to record our 9th episode next week is phenomenal, and a huge thanks to everyone.
Yeah, and I think that actually it works out very nice. There's a nice bit of symbiosis here, folks, that we will then wrap it up the weekend before the first league game of the new season. So by accident, the timing is absolutely perfect. We'll be back next week with the rest of this. I hope you enjoyed it. We very much enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone who sent us in a question, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.